So welcome back to another edition of the Heart to Heart podcast. And my guest today is Jayson Gaddis. So Jayson Gaddis is the author of the book Getting to Zero. You can see it right here. It's something that I thought was an excellent read, and that's why I want to talk to Jayson today. So Jayson, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Psyched to be here.
Yeah, so just getting right into it, you have this book called Getting to Zero: How to Work Through Conflict in Your High Stakes Relationships. So, there's a lot of good information in this book. It seems like it's not just applicable only to romantic relationships, which is what most people kind of think of when they think of relationships is your
Yeah.
romantic relationship. But obviously we have relationships in business, we have relationships with friends, relationships with kids, and as you've pointed out as well, relationship with yourself, which I think is really important and something that also needs to be worked on for a lot of people, including myself. But getting back to the book and the title I find is really interesting. Getting to zero. So I always kind of thought as like, I'm a big fan of Stoic philosophy. As I was mentioned before the podcast, like I'm a big fan of Ryan Holiday.
Yeah.
So when I saw like the title of this book, I was like, I love the title, but I was like, I see this as like an ideal, but maybe not something that is possible. Or
hmm
am I being a little bit pessimistic or cynical there? Is it possible to have zero conflict in all of your relationships?
Yeah. No, that's not possible, but it is possible to get to zero um, when we do
Yes.
have conflict. Like my wife and I have worked very hard to always get to zero through all of our ruptures, disconnections, and fights. That's the commitment because I want to live my life from a place of feeling good, and connected. And it feels really shitty when I'm disconnected from her. My day's harder, it's more intense, I feel worse, I feel like my health suffers. So, yeah, the commitment, it's like an aspiration. It's like, let's always get to zero, but it's definitely not zero doesn't mean we're going to get to a place where we never have conflict again.
Okay. Yeah. And that's how I saw it as well, is that it's something that's, more or less an ideal in terms of the fact that like you're never going to have conflict again, but it is possible whenever there is a conflict to get to zero. And
Yes.
that's kind of how I sort of kind of see it as well. So just kind of getting right into it. There's a couple chapters that I really liked in your book, and the ones that I really liked were how to deal with triggers, and in particular I think, a lot of people, when they hear the word trigger, they're like, okay, how am I going to deal with my triggers? And certainly that's something that I do want to chat with you about. But I,
hmm
I was very interesting though, when you have a full chapter on, how to deal with the other person's triggers.
Yeah.
So, I have a lot of veterans in my practice, of a lot of patients with PTSD, depression, anxiety, and, most of those people are married to someone, right? So they have to have someone to live with. So, um, I think it's very important for people to understand how to deal with their partner's triggers. So I was just wondering, for people who are living with someone who maybe has, PTSD or, some kind of, mental health disorder that's, disrupts their overall relationship, what is kind of like the best method or to try to deal with people when your relationship partner is having a trigger?
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a good question. I mean, the first thing is we don't want to shame or make wrong our partner who has reactions to us or to life. So that could be a veteran with PTSD that's having some unpredictable reactions in the house, for example, due to sounds or due to the time of day or whatever. And for me to shame or make that person wrong, I think it's really not cool. So if I love them, if I'm married to them, if I'm committed to them, it's my work also to not just ask them to go deal with that in the other room by themselves. It's to not abandon them in their need and say, look, there's certain ways you're behaving that are hurtful to me. Um, and I want to help you right now with your reactivity. Like, what am I doing? And how can we treat each other in a way that both of our nervous systems calm down and feel where we feel safe again and where our social engagement system is back online. So it's being really a considerate, caring partner. It's knowing what triggers them. It's knowing their childhood history. that could play into why they're quote overreacting, which is usually not an overreaction, it's just a compounding reaction because they have a bunch of unresolved trauma from their childhood. So when we start to understand and be curious about and stay curious about our partner, whatever their history is, I think we're going to be more successful, right? Than if the spiritual people like to say, you go deal with your triggers, I'll deal with mine. And, this kind of independent approach versus the interdependent approach.
Okay. And so I think there's a couple interesting points there that you said. So one, I think is, first of all, when someone is, going through a conflict, and you feel that you're kind of taking the brunt of it. I think one thing is not to take it personally, because if you
Right.
take it personally, then you're going to get upset. I think the other thing too is that if someone is particularly upset, if you match their emotions, so if they're, angry and then you become angry, then that's just going to escalate. Would you say that when you are in a conflict, you should more or less try to have the opposite emotion or the opposite um, feeling that your partner is going through in order to try to make it sort of neutral? So meaning, like, say if they're very, very angry, maybe you can be very, very calm, and then that calmness will sort of, fester into their energy, and then that may bring them down. Is that something that try to coach with your clients? Or
Yeah, not so much, although I like that. I think it's certainly one way. And it's really hard. The problem is it's really hard to control ourselves when we have a knee-jerk autonomic response to another person's facial expression, their tone of voice, or what they just said, or however escalated they are. We just go primal. We go into our animal and we react. And some of us shut down, some of us freeze, some of us get bigger and want to fight back. And we have very little command of ourselves in those first few seconds, right? So most important, because a lot of people are like, well, how do I not get so reactive? And it's like, it's less about how do you not get so reactive and more about how do I resolve my childhood trauma and how do I repair after I react. So the whole point of the book and my work is how do we clean up the mess after we've made a mess in a good way, so both of us feel at zero, which means we feel we're in a good place again. We're connected to ourselves and we're connected to each other. Because too many people waste time, honestly, trying to not react. And I just, it's very hard if you haven't noticed, right? It's super
yeah.
hard to not raise your voice or have a tone of voice. So more important is to focus on what happens right afterwards. A minute later, an hour later, a day later is like, oh shit, I reacted and I was a jerk. I got to go clean that up.
Okay. Yeah, I think that, delaying things sometimes is a little bit of a tricky subject, because sometimes delaying things can be good because it gives you time to sort of like process your emotions, and then you're able to, think more clearly and have a better overall discussion. But at the same
Yeah.
time too, you know, do you feel that if you delay, you're sort of like avoiding conflict? Like, I don't, like, in my personal opinion, but some people may feel that, if you're not able to deal with something, right on the spot, you're sort of, running, or like you've
Right.
talked about, different trauma responses and that before. So, how do you deal with it when it's a point when you said like your automatic nervous system is just too high, it's too unregulated, you can't deal with it, but you want to delay, but maybe your partner doesn't want you to,
Hmm.
delay this sort of
Yeah.
conflict?
So again, context is everything in agreement. So if you and I are in a relationship, we've talked about this ahead of time. That look, when we go into stressful moments, when we go into conflict, and one or both of us gets upset, what's our plan? And within that planning process, there can be agreements like it's okay for one person to take space. It's okay to go into the other room. It's okay to come back tomorrow morning. That's okay with us. It's not okay to go on for days, right? Where we don't talk about it. That gets into avoiding territory. When one person is sort of just like so angry and so shut down, they're just quiet and they just kind of disappear for days and they withdraw. and they don't say anything. They don't use their adult words to communicate respectfully to their partner. Hey, I know I kind of disappeared. I have every intention of coming back, but I'm really struggling with myself right now, and I'm really scared. That's ideal, right? Um,
Yeah.
so it's we can make agreements like, no, it's you don't get to avoid in an intimate partnership. You know, with our family, sometimes we don't want to do conflict because the stakes are very high, but we just don't want to deal, and we see them once a year at Christmas or something. That's fine. But in an intimate partnership, yeah, you never want to keep avoiding. Not good.
And so, do you ever coach clients maybe to have like a day or maybe, biweekly thing where, you set aside, say, it's Saturday or Sunday for, these 2 hours, no matter what, we're going to talk about anything that we have, didn't feel comfortable talking about during the week. Like, do you think that's
Yeah.
an appropriate strategy for people?
I think it can work, especially for people who aren't uh, great communicators, or maybe let me say it a different way, who are just scared to bring it up in the moment. It's like I'm going to wait till our Sunday check-in when we have hard conversations or anything's on the table for feedback. I'll just wait till then. The problem with that kind of a wait till then approach, wait till the meeting or the check-in, is that within those days, if our check-in's on a Sunday and it's Monday and we just got in a fight, that's set, you have 6 days now of festering in resentment and not speaking your truth. And how does that impact your entire week? So my preference is to deal, like stop, drop, and deal, and get real, like right now, as soon as the two people are available. And I know with busy lives and work and kids, and overwhelm and exhaustion and all that, it's tricky. And if my partnership is a priority, then I'm going to make the time. So I always encourage as soon as possible, because again, it starts to go into long-term memory, and it compounds. It can compound old unresolved conflicts as well.
Okay. So more or less, to try to summarize it, you should try to deal with it the best you can on the spot. But if you can't deal with it, for whatever reason, due to just exhaustion from, other things that are exhausting you, work, like stress, whatever it is, then, explain that to your partner. Make sure that you're having that conversation before the escalation happens, that like, hey, if we get into a fight and I'm, completely exhausted, I may not be able to deal with it that day, but I promise with you that, the next morning I'll take 5 or 10 minutes to kind of like hammer this out with you. And if we don't resolve it, then, we'll schedule another time and then resolve it at that time. Is that sort of
Yeah,
approach
you're
you take?
exactly like my wife and I. Sometimes I could stay up all night and try to figure it out, and she's like, "Dude, I'm so exhausted, I can't think straight after 9 p.m." So if we get into a fight at 8:45, she's kind of she goes offline, right? And so for me to keep pushing, be like, "No, we need to talk this out right now," that makes it worse, and I've dug myself many holes trying to do that with her. And finally, like, okay, I get my wife is sort of her wiring is a certain way. It's better for us to pick it up in the morning.
Okay. Excellent. And getting back to a little bit to, how to deal with people who, are struggling with PTSD and that kind of thing. Because again, I do have a lot of patients who struggle with that. And I don't want them
Yeah,
to think that, because they have a certain condition related to the mental health, that, they're not someone who, could get a good partner or will be a good partner to
right.
someone. So say if are struggling, you're struggling, you identified it, you're not denying it. Um, how do you relay that message to your partner that, sometimes it's going to be some really difficult times for me because, I have, PTSD from being, a combat veteran kind of thing. How would you, like, what would you say to someone if they have PTSD and they are struggling in the relationship and they think that their own PTSD is affecting that particular relationship?
Yeah. Well, I'd say you're as lovable as anyone else, and you deserve a great partner who is, despite your reactivity, can hang in there with you. And most people will find someone who can hang. And, um, the treatments now are with psychedelic therapy and so many other approaches, ketamine, et cetera. Veterans and people with PTSD are seeing better results, right? And actually healing. So that's huge. So the person, I would say to the person in PTSD that has PTSD, make sure you're getting like really good treatment so you can continue to work with yourself. And because that sends the message to your partner, hey, I care about the impact of my behavior on you. I'm working on it versus this kind of card that I pull out and I say, well, I'm a veteran and I have PTSD. Sorry. This is just how I am. Like that's kind of bullshit, right?
Yeah.
So it's the PTSD person needs to have a commitment to working on their PTSD over time. And then the partner is like, yeah, I'm signing up for all of you. I love you. I'm committed to figuring this out. And it's hard for me. Some of your reactivity is really intense for me and I get triggered and it brings up all my childhood stuff. And I'm here and I care about you and I'm in this. So let's keep finding ways to get to zero, to work with our triggers, to be a great team. And if we need to get outside help, like a relationship coach or a therapist, great, let's do that. Um, but it's sort of like I don't believe people. There's like someone can be too much, right? Um, there's always a partner that will be able to handle them. Is my sort of view.
Okay, I think that was a very, very good answer to a very difficult question. And, the way that I see it is that, you do have to accept the person fully, love them fully no matter what, but also too, you have to put some responsibility back on that person as well. Meaning that, to say that like, someone should just love you just the way you are is kind of ridiculous and an immature statement in some ways. You need
Right.
to ensure that the other person is working on something. So, if you love someone and you have, something that's bothering you and that's affecting the relationship, then if you love that person truly, what you would do is you would try to fix whatever's bothering you that's bothering the relationship so it won't bother the other person anymore because you want to take away the other
Right.
person's pain. And if you can take away someone else's pain by, healing your own pain, well then, you're killing two birds with one stone there. And I think that's a fantastic thing to do. So, again, for people who, I know I mentioned PTSD a few times, but, no matter what it is, it could just be, treatment resistant depression or treatment, resistant anxiety. If you are having some emotions that are coming up that are affecting your relationship, it is on you to try to fix those emotions and fix your reactivities. But at the same time, you should be able to find a partner who supports you during those times. And I think you're right. I think for the most part, people do end up, finding a partner who is able to, deal with or be with a person who does have some reactivity or poor emotional reactivity sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it's up to everybody to become a more emotionally mature and responsible adult in a partnership. It's just, I mean, I can't tell you how many of us are actually quite immature when it comes to conflict, and we go into our reactivity that we did in our childhood or our parents did, and it's sort of automatic. And then most people are kind of winging it, trying to find their way through conflict. And I'm like, that's not good enough. That's not going to get you through hard times. You need to have like a plan, a strategy, tools. You need to develop yourself. You need to work with your own trauma. You need to take responsibility for your behavior. There's so much an adult can do to create the conditions to have a successful partnership.
Yeah, and the more you work on yourself, the more your partner is going to see that you're working on yourself, and the more they're going to admire you, which I think is a very important, thing in relationships too, is to have your partner admire you. I think once admiration goes in a relationship, then there's a lot of things to be worked on then. And even I think Plato said that, love is nothing but admiration, which
Mm.
take that with a grain of salt, but I think admiration is a key component to relationships.
Yeah, and I would say the word respect for me is kind of the word I would use like that. And I would say respect. It's like the moment I start to not respect you because you're not taking care of yourself, you're not working on yourself, the relationship's going to start to move towards ending when respect is lost. It's a bummer to see that.
One thing that I wanted to ask you about today, Jason, was as I saw online that you're also trained in EMDR. It's not something I'm too familiar with. I need to actually familiarize myself more with that method. But I have had some patients tell me that it's just been incredibly effective for them.
Yeah.
So I know it's a little bit of a segue from what we were just discussing, but I was just wondering if you could explain what EDMR is or EMDR is, and how it can benefit various patients with various mental health disorders.
Yeah. So this was many, many years ago that I was trained. So I'm probably not the best authority here. But essentially, EMDR is kind of a tapping technique, unlike the, if you're in an office with a therapist, they would tap your left leg and then your right leg, or you would have headphones on and it would go. It's bilateral stimulation. So what they learned by doing this is that through the stimulation of like a sound like dot 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 going in one ear and out the other, and then while going into the story of the trauma, for some reason it does something to the brain that I can't explain, that makes it safe to then go into the trauma and look at it and feel their experience. And I think it stands for, and you can also do it with your eyes. Like you can do, this is brain spotting, they call it. If you follow a
Okay.
wand and you, wherever your eyes kind of start twitching is where you need to hold the wand. So I've done a bunch of that as a client, which is cool. Um, but EMDR, I think, stands for eye movement desensitization reprogramming or something like that, or repatterning.
Okay.
Um, and it's fascinating, man. It's for single incident trauma. It's very effective, like a car accident. A lot of people, if you have a car accident that was like scary and you're scared to go out in the street again or scared to get in a car, and it's just one incident, EMDR, like a couple sessions of EMDR can knock that out so that your amygdala is offline and you're like feeling safe again to go into the car or go into a street. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I had one friend who he had a really bad conflict with someone, and they were really close friends, like online they were close friends, that kind of thing. And then but close friends in real life as well. And then they had a bad conflict, and he was just kind of wrecked about it. And he said he did 2 sessions of EMDR, and it kind of just resolved it completely, because he was like
Yeah.
ruminating over this, ruined relationship for a while. And I mentioned that just because you said, it's really good for like single kind of incidents. Like
Yeah.
as soon as it happens, it seems like if you apply this technique as soon as it happens, it's gonna provide, there's a high chance that it's gonna provide a substantial amount of relief. Like that's what, I've seen anecdotally from patients and from friends. And, it kind of seems like that's what you've, experienced with your clients as well, is that, if you use this immediately after that, a bad incident, you're probably going to get some relief out of it.
Yeah. And actually, you can do it years later, if you still have the memory, and it'll resolve it. So it's worth investigating. And also, I think people need to understand that, like a simple definition of trauma that I like from Gabor Mate is that it's a disconnection from ourselves. Because we go into a traumatic experience and we have to disconnect from ourselves to survive the experience. And so any good trauma therapy or trauma modality basically takes you back to the moment or back to the experience, and slow enough in a way that you can stay regulated with tools that you can stay present in, and you get connected to yourself, and then the trauma sort of resolves. It's pretty amazing. So there's lots of different modalities out there and technologies to resolve trauma these days. And again, the psychedelic therapy works because people, like MDMA is amazing because people, it takes the amygdala offline and you can actually go into really painful experiences and feel safe to look at it and to be present in it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of psychedelics. I think MDMA is going to be an amazing
Oh
medicine
my
for
God.
couples therapy.
Yeah.
I do a lot of ketamine prescriptions at my office. Unfortunately, I can't prescribe psilocybin or MDMA for patients, but I do
Yeah.
feel
Not
that it's
yet.
going to be incredibly effective. And so, yeah, I'd love to chat with you a little bit more about that. So, MDMA, and what have you seen in terms of clinical experience with your clients in terms of transformations with MDMA and couples therapy?
Well, I can't do that, right, legally, and I don't do that
Right.
because it would be, behind the scenes. And I actually haven't ever facilitated a couple on MDMA, but I have many friends who have, and people I know, both on the receiving end and the giving end. And I've been on the receiving end of MDMA assisted just inner work for
Hmm.
years, and it's incredible for me. And the essence is like for a couple, what I've heard is it just again takes the fear and the aggression on the need to defend oneself offline, and so that people can actually have a safe, heart connected conversation. And that's incredibly powerful for really stuck couples. It's like I think it's a good intervention if you're really, really stuck and you've tried tons of therapy and coaching and nothing's working, and you've been to workshops and you read books, and it gets at pretty intractable stuff, both
Yeah.
for individual work as well as couples work.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes there's a little bit of a stigma to it or a little bit of a shame to it, or there's like, I'm too good for it. Like I don't need that. Like if my
Uh
relationship
huh.
was, I don't need MDMA to be in a relationship. Like, and if you do need it, then that's the wrong
There's something
person
wrong with
for you.
you, or yeah,
Like, I don't think that's the right approach,
definitely not.
whatsoever, and because it's like, if you look at, even something like diabetes, like, yeah, you should diet and exercise and all that kind of stuff. But if, push comes to shove, yeah, sure, you should take the metformin and then, it'll probably lower your hemoglobin A1C and maybe you won't even be diabetic anymore. Like sometimes you need that intervention.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
and the same thing, I think, sometimes with relationships, like you can do everything perfect. Doesn't mean like you're doing anything wrong. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. Doesn't mean anything wrong with your partner or even the relationship itself. It's just that, you've gotten to a point where, you need some extra help, which I think is okay. And it's a shame that, people, still feel, I think it's just like too proud, or they just have like
Yeah,
what, this
absolutely.
blockage about it.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you're bringing this up because particularly for men, right? There's a lot of stigma for men that if I go to a therapist, even though therapy is more widely accepted now, and it's like you see celebrities talking about therapy, and it's like more cool or more okay. For men in particular, there's still this stigma that's thick, and a guy thinks, well, if I go to therapy, that means there's something wrong with me. I'm flawed in some way, and I can't do it by myself because men are so taught to do it by themselves and to figure this out on your own, and you're not a man if you can't get your shit together in a relationship. And it's like, dude, no one got the map here. This was not taught
Yeah.
in schools. We're all kind of incompetent. We're all flying blind. Some of us have less of a childhood trauma history, and it maybe goes a little better for us. But just about every one of us struggles in high stakes relationships when there's stress between us. It's kind of a human thing. It's really normal. So I like to try to normalize that so that people can get the help they need, right? Because I just want people to get care and to get through their hard challenges. But you can't do that if you're too proud, like you said.
Yeah, and you've had a post too. I mean, this comes back to I think some of the foundations of what you teach is that relationships take work, and it's insane to think that if you said to someone you should just be able to walk on the basketball court on the basketball court and beat LeBron James, people would be
Right.
like, you're insane. Like
Yeah.
like nobody thinks that. Like we know that it takes a lot of work to be able to get to a high level. But for whatever reason, for relationships, we just think that everything should just fall magically into place, and that if someone and that as soon as you have a conflict, then that means that that person's not the right person for you. And I think that's what we've kind of gotten to in society. And I think particularly with the younger generation, that's what they think. They
Oh
think
yeah.
that as soon as there's any kind of conflict, that that means that the relationship should end. But really all it is it's just a stage in your relationship. And I know you said in some of your videos, like, once you get past the honeymoon stage, then there's going to be work. Because generally
Hmm.
speaking, in the honeymoon stage, you don't really have to put any work into the
You
relationship.
don't have to do
Things,
shit
yeah,
except follow your
things,
feelings, and it feels good.
yeah, things just do like fall into place. Like no one's struggling with like not having enough sex in the relate
Right.
in the honeymoon phase. And so people think that's what the relationship should be forever. But the reality is that it's never going to be like that. Once a honeymoon phase is over, then there's going to be a work phase. And I think once you, as corny as it sounds, I think once you work past through that difficult work phase, that's almost even better than the honeymoon phase because it's something that like you've worked for, and
Yeah.
I think that you get more, gratification through getting reward through doing work as opposed to just something that just sort of like magically happens in the 3-month honeymoon phase, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually, I call it the challenging stage, or where there's conflict starts to happen, right?
Yeah.
And things get challenging. And if people can get through that, and that kind of continues throughout the life of the relationship, it just gets less intense. But if couples can figure that out, they move into what I call like true love and like really loving someone. And then they get into building a secure, strong relationship because they know how to be a team. And it's actually the very fact of adversity is the thing that builds security and strength in a relationship, right? It's just like weight training. You're not going to get a good muscle tone if you actually don't pick something heavy up. It's the same in a relationship. You actually need to meet challenge and meet adversity to get stronger, literally, as a couple. And a lot of people have a version of that, just like they have a version to lifting weights, right?
Yeah, and I mean, if you have, and then if in your mind, like, there's been some times in the past where, we've had some really bad fights, but we've been able to get through it. Then if another conflict comes up, then naturally you're going to think, okay, like I'm going to be able to handle this,
Yeah,
So I
that's
think
right.
that that's like a very exciting stage to get to is that, like you're not afraid of a fight coming up, or you're not afraid of conflict because you know how to deal with conflict.
Yeah,
And I think that, again, something that we chatted about right at the beginning is that it's really, really important not just to know what to do, during conflict. I mean, obviously that's critical, but it's important to have discussions of what is going to happen when you are going to have conflict. And I think that would make just a tremendous amount of difference in a lot of people's relationships. So like instead of having this like fantasy that like, we're not going to have any fights, it's like, okay, like listen, like we're together, we made a commitment, we married, one another, we're going to be together forever. We need to figure out what happens when we're going to have a fight. And I think that's a much, much more mature and practical relationship approach than to just say that, we're not going to have any fights
yeah,
because, we love each other so much, sort of thing.
yeah, completely. Yeah, it's sad that most people approach long-term partnership in fantasy land and they get married, they write their vows and their vows sound all special and everybody's at the wedding celebrating and there's zero plan for when shit gets hard. Like there's no plan. There might be a vow like when things get hard, we'll just keep loving each other. And I'm like, dude, love is not enough. Sorry, it's not going to get you through it. You're going to actually have to have some tools. You're going to have to roll up your sleeves and deal. This person is going to piss you off to no end someday. You're going to get so triggered by them. You're going to want to sleep with someone else. So many challenges are going to come your way. And then you have kids, and then you're really screwed because you're not going to sleep and you're not having sex and you're disconnected. People have no fucking clue what they're getting into. I always say to people, do not get married unless you're completely committed to looking at yourself in the mirror and doing work.
Yeah, because obviously it sounds like it is, a lot of work. I mean, I'm in a relationship where I'm engaged. I don't have kids yet, so there's, some work that's, I haven't had to deal with yet that a lot of people have had to. But yeah, I mean, if you are going to get married, you're going to commit yourself to someone, especially if you're going to have kids. I mean, you really have to be all in because it's just like taking on, say, like a new job or a new venture. It's something that you're going to have to do or deal with, every single day.
Totally.
And
Like
one,
health, right?
yeah,
Now at my age, I am committed to being healthy the rest of my life. Like I have to, it's a daily thing now where when I was 20, I was like, I don't know, I'm a pretty healthy guy. I don't have to do shit. Now it's like, man, I'm earning my health every day. And I want to live a long time. So I have to like show up every single day.
yeah. And coming back to health, like one thing I have done recently, the last 5 or 10 years, so that I didn't do before, is the mobility work. Like you
Mm,
have to do mobility work when you're
right.
older. Like it sucks because it's just not fun. I'd way rather just lift heavy weights.
Yeah.
But mobility work is so important. And if you don't do the mobility work, you're not going to be able to lift the heavy
Amen.
weights. Um, But one thing I wanted to ask you about too was the Nestor method. That was probably one of my favorite things that I read in your book. So I was just wondering how you developed that and how have you been able to apply that to your clients?
Yeah, cool. And just for context, Mike's talking about this acronym I have called Nestor, NESTR, and I'll say what it is first, and then I'll kind of rewind. So N stands for number. You just put a number on your trigger, 0 to 10, how triggered you are in any given moment. And this is helpful. So if you and your partner need to check in, it's like, how are you? You have information, you have data that you can share. So I say, I'm a 6. That's my number. E is emotion. So what's the emotion right now? I'm angry. S is sensation. Where are you feeling that in your body? I feel a lot of heat in my chest, or I feel tingly in my back. T is thoughts. What are you thinking about? Are you ruminating on something? R is resource. Like, where do you feel just okay? And this comes from two places: meditation and trauma work. So in trauma work, they always teach you to get, as a client, they teach you to get resourced. Like, you got to be able to locate a resource in your body, or if you can't find one in your body, you close your eyes and you visualize being in a really safe place that's got like a castle wall around it with lions on the outside. So you feel your nervous system, through visualization, you can start to feel safe again. That's a resource. And then meditation, it wasn't until I started meditating when I was 30 that I started to get a handle on being with my experience. I didn't know how to be with my experience, my inner experience, emotions, sensations in my body. Up to that point, I was just medicating, drugs and alcohol, checking out. And so finally, I was able to just sit quietly for 9 hours and actually just be with myself and be still. And there's tremendous power in not running away from your experience, as you know. And so that's kind of where this comes from. And in teaching clients and then students for so many years, it just became a great tool for people when they're triggered to not only calm down, but also be with the dysregulation and be with what's going on inside. Because so many of us, we get in a fight and we go right to our phones, right? Or we go right to running, getting just distracting. We go back to work. We get busy so that we don't have to feel anything uncomfortable. So Nestor is a tool to help you be with your discomfort, your fear, your anxiety, and so that you don't react from that place.
Okay. So basically, once an emotion starts to surface, instead of trying to distract yourself by, with your phone or with work or with something else, what you want to do is you want to actually, you know, figure out why you're feeling that emotion. And then the Nestor method is something that can help you decipher what emotion you're feeling and also how to react to it and how to deal with it instead of just suppressing it. And that's
Yeah,
something that you can do. Like this, I think, is more with getting to yourself. It's more of a relationship
yeah,
with
that's right.
with yourself as opposed to with your romantic partner. But again, we've said multiple times throughout this podcast that when you improve yourself and when you improve your own emotions, you're also improving your relationship as well, just because you're going to create less reactivity and less negative emotion for your partner. But I really, really liked that when I read it. I'm just looking at the book now. It's page 130 in your book, and I've got a few things here kind of highlighted and circled. And I've actually used that in my own life recently, and I
Mm,
found that it has made me a little bit more calm in certain situations. And then also too, when those situations have come up again, it's been easier because it's like, oh, I just used the Nestor method and this thing went away. So now that this conflict's coming up again, I'm not really afraid of it. It's not like a big deal because
yeah,
I have these tools that I've used in the past that have been helpful and that have been very, very successful. So, I think that it's something that a lot of people should look into and look up, and it's definitely worth reading your book, just for that, one thing alone. So, yeah, I'm very, very happy that you were able to come up with that method. Have you had a lot of clients like tell you that they've
yeah,
used this and they've had
yeah.
it?
It seems to be huge for people, and I have downloadable guided Nestor meditations as well. But it's basically, people don't have a tool, kind of like we started out the conversation. When you get triggered, it's the people are like, what do I do? Right? They don't know what to do. they just do their habit, which is to blame or shut down or dissociate or whatever. And this is like a new thing you can kind of build into your life, where all it takes is 2 minutes. Sometimes it's not a big long hour-long meditation thing. It doesn't require an app. You do it a few times, you can get it. And it's what I would do all the time early on in my relationship, in particular with my wife, is like, I don't know what's going on with me. So I would sit down quietly, I'd do a version of this, and then I would come back to her more aware, more regulated, and I'd be able to tell her, I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel hurt, which was huge for me, right? I had no vocabulary for that shit before this. So yeah, people say it's incredibly useful. So thanks for saying that too.
Yeah, and coming back to the meditation too, obviously you have quite a bit of experience in education just on meditation itself, and so you know is there any particular app or is there any particular type of medicate or of meditation that you recommend to people just for their own self-regulation of emotions, like not necessarily to do with relationships per se, or like what is your daily meditation practice?
Yeah. So I
One.
sit for 10 or 20 minutes in the mornings now. I used to be like a hardcore, I was a Buddhist meditator going on retreats and month-long retreats, and that was a good part of my life, and it was all helping me get regulated basically because I was so fucking dysregulated. Um, but there's so many apps now.
Yeah.
And I think they're all valuable. And so what's cool about apps is it's sort of like it becomes your like little personal trainer. Okay, just set your timer 10 minutes, listen to the music or hear the guided person's soothing voice and just do that for 10 minutes. And the person doesn't really have to think about it too much.
Hmm.
And there is something about no app, no nothing, no phone. Because I notice sometimes when I'm meditating 15 minutes in, I'm like, I pick up my phone just out of default addiction. I start scrolling and I'm like, what the fuck? That wasn't part of my plan here. Like, what am I doing? Set down the damn phone in the other room. There's something simple and powerful about just silence and following the breath. And that's a shamatha, meditation where you just follow an object. And I love when the Nestor kind of came out of also uh, a tool for when you're triggered. So it's like, oh, because a lot of people don't want to meditate when they're triggered because it's so uncomfortable. They want to meditate to be calm or to when they're calm. But man, I'm curious what you'd recommend because there's just so many now. I don't follow a particular app.
Yeah.
I've tried a few and they seem fine, but I find my system works best just quiet, occasionally with some background music. Yeah, just stillness.
Yeah, I like your method as well, and the reason why is because I have done some meditation before, and I will maybe do that in the future. I think maybe it's good to have like a base for it.
Yeah.
But the thing is that some people will meditate, and then when a conflict comes up, they sort of think that because they meditated in the morning, that at 6 p.m. when they have a fight with their wife, that like that meditation is going to
Right.
take over and translate into it like resolving it better, and it's
Hmm.
probably not, right? So what
Right.
you need are tools that you can use like on the spot, and that's why again, I like the Nestor method. And there's another guy, Barry McDonough, and he has this thing called like the dare method, and when you're having a panic attack, he says like run towards it, because
Yeah,
what
exactly.
happens is that it's it breaks up that connection of your amygdala firing, and when you're unable to utilize your prefrontal cortex, if you actually run towards it, it'll break that connection, so your amygdala will stop firing, and then you can use your prefrontal cortex. So I think I don't want to say more important, but maybe it is more important to have like tools for the conflict when it's happening on that spot,
Hmm.
so I do think that there's a lot of value in meditating on your own, but I also think that that's better for maybe yourself and regulating your own emotions. But if you're having a conflict with someone else, then you're going to have to maybe utilize a different type of method, because if you're in a boardroom meeting, you have a panic attack, you can't just meditate in the middle of the room, like you
Right.
have to have something
Different
to kind of
tools.
like
Yeah.
help you out. So I think it's important for people to kind of know that. I know we only have about 10 minutes left, and there was one thing that I really wanted to chat with you about today. you have this term in your book called mutuality. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that some people struggle with a little bit. So basically, it's mutuality from my understanding is when both people in the relationship feel that they're both contributing, they're both getting back what they should be getting back. But when you don't have mutuality, you have one person who maybe feels like they're doing all the work, or they're getting more out of the relationship than or getting less out of the relationship than say the other person. So, and I think that builds a lot of like resentment. So if you are someone and you are feeling like you're doing most of the work in the relationship, like how do you approach the other person and to try to resolve that?
Yeah, it's an important question because a lot of people do find themselves in a dynamic like this, right? They want a great partnership, but they feel like their partner is sitting on their ass, not contributing. And in the book, I have a diagram, kind of a bird's eye view or a drone view of a boat as a metaphor where two people are in a boat. And if one person's paddling and we're all a
Yes.
partnership, they're out in the middle of the ocean, and only one person's paddling and the other person's kind of just laying back, you're going to go in a circle, right? Because the paddle's only on one side. So
Hmm.
you want a partnership where two people are paddling and two people are meeting the challenges of the stormy seas and the sharks and all the adversity that's going to come your way. Both people need to participate. So that's mutuality. I have a term I call standing for three, where I take a stand for myself and what I want. I take a stand for you and what you want, and I take a stand for us together as a team. So that's kind of the concept of excuse me, of mutuality. And when you're with someone who's a little resistant, there's things we can do. A lot of people, what they do is they complain and bitch and nag and coach and therapize, and they do things. They behave in a way that has the other person feel judged and criticized and not inspired, right? And the person just retreats further. Hey, listen to this podcast. Hey, read this book. Hey, you should come to therapy with me. Hey, you need to work on yourself. That approach really is going to backfire. So instead of that, I tell people, if it's not a lost cause yet, one last thing you can try is to talk through their values and inspire them. So number one, be the change you want to see in them. So just live it. Live how you like, treat them how you want to be treated. And yeah, if they don't reciprocate, that sucks. But you can certainly invite them in through their values. So let's say they're a CEO of a fast moving startup company and they have a high value on making money and work. You want to help them see that by working on the relationship, it's going to actually free them up and make them more money and make them more successful. So you're talking to them about them rather than talking to them about you, which is the mistake most people make, is me, 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 me. You're not meeting my needs. You're not, nah, 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 nah. So we can inspire people through their values. So if someone's into fitness, same thing. It's like, hey, this is going to actually help you be in better shape, be more disciplined with your health schedule, probably sleep better at night. It's going to help you in all kinds of ways if we work on our relationship. If you know, are willing to put in some reps here on learning how to listen to me better during conflict. And
Yeah.
smart people get this. They're like, oh shit, you're right. You're actually going to be nagging me less and be on my off my back if I participate.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense, and it resonates a lot. I don't know, for me, I could say more in particular, but I've read the book, The Five Love Languages,
Yeah.
and I've had this conversation with my fiance before, and like number one for me is acts of service.
Uh-huh.
I'll just because like I'm a very busy person, so if someone can like help me out, like that means so much to me, right?
Yeah.
So I've always kind of made that clear, and that's certainly been very, very helpful in our relationship for sure, because when you have someone else that can help you and that can meet your needs, it's critically important. But at the same time too, what you were saying is that I think that what we do sometimes is that we read something like you said, like a podcast or book or something like that, and like it resonates with us so much that we just want to share it,
Yeah.
particularly with like our partner kind of thing. But it's like they haven't even seen that yet. Like they don't know anything about it. So like don't focus on necessarily what like excites you. Like focus on what's exciting them right now. Like help
Yeah.
them out with what they want to get. And I think that and that's, what it sounds like what you try to do with your clients, and that if you do that, you're probably going to have a lot more success in your relationship, as opposed to just trying to, throw all of your values and what you think is exciting onto them, as opposed to just trying to
Hmm.
get genuinely interested in what they're interested in, and then try to help facilitate that and make their life a little bit better that way.
Yeah, totally. And then the person needs to like, let's say they try all this and it doesn't work, but they stay in this kind of coach helper role. That person needs to look at the next level down, which could be that you, person doing this behavior, are more on the codependent spectrum, and you're investing in an unfair relationship where you help them but they don't help you. And a lot of people get stuck in those kind of relationships for too long, and then they blame the other person. Well, the other person won't do the work, but they're missing looking in the mirror going, why am I in a habit of trying to help this person that actually isn't asking for help? They're not interested in doing relationship work, but I keep staying and I keep trying. Usually that person's in a childhood pattern that they need to break, and they have a lot of work to do there, but it's pretty cool to help a person get empowered there, because they won't tolerate these unfair relationships.
So have you seen people be in sort of unfair relationships where one is doing all the work and then they've had a kind of breakthrough, and then the relationship has gotten better because the other person's picked up the slack and they've
Yes,
do
I
the
see
work
both.
together?
Yeah, totally. I see both, where the other person wakes up out of their trance. And they're like, holy shit, I've been treating you unfairly. Oh my God. Because they've been enabling, if you think about it, if the helper is kind of enabling the other person all the time and doing a bunch of
Hmm.
things for them. So the other person can just sit on their ass. And they've trained them not to do anything. So if they back off, it's like the person wakes up. That can work. But I also see that person that gets empowered is like, I am done being in an unfair, non-mutual relationship, and I'm done being treated this way. I'm out.
Yeah. Okay, Jason, I really hate to do this, but we only have a couple minutes left, unfortunately. So can you tell the people, I'm just going to show it here on the screen real quick again, where they can get your book online, and a little bit more about you, and where they can find your services if they want to take you up on that.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So Getting to Zero is in all the places, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, whatever. It's also audio on Audible. I read the whole book. And then I'm on Instagram and YouTube at Jayson Gaddis. I'm very active there. And then the Relationship School is where my podcast is, relationshipschool.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Jason. I really do appreciate it. And for everyone listening, I'll be back again next week.
Thanks, Mike.